You found this video, which means you are smarter than everybody else, getting ahead of the game pretty early, and I'm absolutely excited to be back. For those of you that are new, this is the first video back from last season. Absolutely amazing, pumped to get it done. Been doing a lot of research, filling out the spreadsheets, doing the mock drafts, getting the news, everything that goes into making these amazing videos for you guys that I love making. And you all should know that I miss you very, very, very much. I'm glad to get this thing going again. But you click the title of this video, you see it. These are 7 players that I am not loving drafting in fantasy football this year. Yes, it is a little bit early, but it is still very important to be aware of the trends and everything else. But this video is still very important because a lot of people hold on to last season's standings and all the stats from last season, which every year is a new year, so it's gonna be a little bit different. You can't necessarily hold on to what you had. But you guys know I hate to waste people's time, so let's go ahead and get into the first player that I really am not loving drafting at their ADP, at their average draft position, where they're being drafted right now. All of it will change, but Marvin Harrison, oh no, I do not like his value. And this is a little bit tough to understand and a little bit tough to just internalize myself because we all loved him coming into the season. He's really good. I understand that. He's on a pretty decent team with the Cardinals. Kyler Murray is not a bad quarterback by any means. He is more than capable of supporting a wide receiver 1 in fantasy football, but the risk specifically is just so high compared to where we're drafting him at. Let me show you. His ADP is a wide receiver 10 as a rookie, which means he's about an early second round pick, and I could see him sneaking all the way into the end of the first round as the season gets closer. And again, this has to do with opportunity cost. He's being drafted around a really good zone of wide receivers where we can really go any direction. You got guys like Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Davante Adams, Puka, even Nico Collins if you'd want him. Not really though, he's kind of farther down the line. But he is consistently being drafted over all of these wide receivers who arguably have the same upside as he does, and he is a rookie, so it's going to carry a lot more risk. Let's say you don't want a wide receiver. There's also a really good group of running backs around his ADP, like Jahmyr Gibbs, like Kyron Williams, like JT. So just the opportunity cost of him finishing as like a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy and returning his value that you're drafting him that early at is a pretty low chance. And with your first 2 picks in your first 2 rounds of fantasy football, you relatively want to stay somewhat safe and get a lot of your upside guys in the later rounds because they build the base of your team. And with him trending up, probably going to be taken in the back half of the first round, I really don't see a world where I can be comfortable taking him over all of these elite running backs and wide receivers because the next couple rounds in fantasy football are really just washy with a bunch of different players. They're good, but there's no elite guys, so I'd rather take an elite guy that has the potential to finish as the number 1, number 2 running back or wide receiver in the early second than a rookie wide receiver that historically does take longer to get acclimated and get going into the offense. It's nothing against him, it's just how it works in offenses. If anything, he's going to be a great trade for target a couple weeks into the season, but it's just a bit too much of an unnecessary risk, and I think you guys can put that together. But speaking of risks, if you guys are not following this page, you are missing out on a whole lot of fantasy football information every single day, every single week coming out, especially when the season gets going. You're not going to want to miss any of these. I recommend you subscribe, maybe even hit that like button so you have this page saved somewhere. I would recommend it. It would mean the world to me. But our second player that I really am not loving drafting, and his ADP is a bit too high for me moving into the wide receivers, is Xavier Worthy. And this one does pain me a lot, and I know everybody's going, whoa.
Yes, Patrick Mahomes is the fastest wide receiver in the league. There's no Tyree. He has opportunity.
I get it. He's a really good wide receiver. I love, if anybody's going to succeed, it's probably going to be him in this offense. But this man is going in an ADP of wide receiver 36. That is insanely high for a rookie wide receiver that just got drafted, really just off his speed. Yes, he is good. He's a good route runner. But if you're taking that risk next to guys like Chris Godwin, Deontay Johnson, who I think is a sleeper that you'll see in future videos here, also Marquise Brown, who's also on the Chiefs now, it really just does not make sense taking him with a 5th round pick. That is a really steep price for a rookie that could most definitely just bust completely. The only way he matches that 5th round ADP, possibly even moving up when the season gets closer, is if he's about tied for the wide receiver 1 role with Rashid Rice, with Marquise Brown behind Travis Kelce, because he's still going to be the number 1. I don't care how old he gets, he's going to be that number 1 guy. Again, if he's going to succeed, it's going to be on the Chiefs offense, but it is way too early to be taking a risk on him. If I were you, and what I would be doing is keeping an eye on him, seeing what his ADP does. It might drop. If it does, I might consider taking him in the 6th, 7th, 8th round. Hopefully some of the draft and the combine hype does die down a little bit because he's a great athlete. He's a great receiver. Obviously, he's in the NFL. Keep an eye on him. I know his draft stock is going to change. Rashid Rice is going to be suspended who knows how many games, so maybe keep an eye on him for trade purposes later down the line of the season. I'm not going to take him at a 5th round value, but a couple weeks into the season when he's still getting acclimated, he's still getting put into the offense, because that is going to happen. And then you got Rashid Rice coming back. His value is going to be a lot lower. A strategy that I like that works is you can trade one of your tight ends, because really from rounds 3 to rounds 8, all of the tight ends are at a couple fantasy point difference throughout the entire season, so you can trade one of them and pick one up off waivers, and it really won't hurt you that bad. So make a trade for him right before their bye week in week 6. I know it's an early bye week. Rashid Rice will probably be coming back. The hype will die down even more. Then you can get him on your team. He's a fine rookie for Dynasty as well. Just the ADP I'm not in love with, and I want you guys to be aware of that and watch it as it changes. But another guy I can't wrap my head around this early in the season at their ADP is Rhamondre Stevenson, and this one quite literally just confuses me. And this just comes down to situation. A lot of these guys I don't hate as players. They're pretty good athletes, but the situations, their ADPs, their value just doesn't match. The Patriots have never really trusted Rhamondre Stevenson. They signed Zeke and split the backfield with him last year, and then they signed Antonio Gibson. As a Commanders fan, I know you can see the jersey back there. Antonio Gibson is not some amazing elite Christian McCaffrey level running back that's going to take all of the work from Rhamondre Stevenson. That's just crazy to say. And you might look at his ADP and say, well, he's being drafted in the 7th round. It really can't be that bad. You can't lose that much value on him. But again, the risk is just not there. In that 7th, 8th, 9th round, in the later half of the draft, you need to be using your picks on guys with upside that have potential to break out, like Puka Nacua last year, Nico Collins. That's not this. Drake May, he's probably a really good quarterback. He's still earning his starting role in the season. I think he's going to be the starting quarterback, but who knows with this offense? He might not start as that. But either way, this offense still is not going to be amazing. They just don't have the weapons. They don't have the coaching. And this backfield is going to be split. They didn't sign a guy like Antonio Gibson for no reason. And if we know anything about Rhamondre Stevenson, is that he gets a majority of his fantasy points in the air, off the targets, running routes out of the backfield. He's great in the check down game, but so is Antonio Gibson. And that's pretty much exactly what he does and what he was great at doing for the Commanders. Great. And the Commanders aren't that good. Antonio Gibson was the third down back. He was getting the receiving role. He was getting that work. Even if his target share wasn't insanely different from Brian Robinson, his snap share and his usage and time on field on passing plays and third downs was insanely different. That's his role. So if any of Rhamondre Stevenson's check down or just pass game work gets split with Antonio Gibson, which it will, in a Drake May led offense that's probably going to be a little bit better and want to air the ball out just a little bit more, you could really be throwing away your 7th round pick for a split backfield. It's just messy. I don't like it. His ADP is next to guys like Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones, DeAndre Swift, guys that are pretty much easily better than him and have a good opportunity and trajectory upwards to actually get fantasy points and improve over the season. Keeping it on the running backs here, the next guy I am fading is Rachaad White. He's going as the RB12. His ADP is 32. That's about the 2nd round of fantasy football drafts on average. But he's getting drafted next to guys like Brandon Ayuk, Derrick Henry, who I do like this season. Again, we'll hear of more in the videos later in the year, so make sure to be subscribed for that. But if you just look at this picture, it doesn't make any sense. Last season was a pretty interesting season for Rachaad White. He finished with the 2nd most touches in the entire NFL as far as running backs go, only 3 behind Christian McCaffrey. He was at 336. Christian McCaffrey was at 339, and he still finished as the RB8 despite CMC finishing as the RB1. Now, yes, the offensive lines are different, teams are a lot different, but still, he had the same amount of touches Christian McCaffrey had last season, and he finished 120 fantasy points lower than Christian McCaffrey. And even lower if we're counting half PPR standard leagues, because he got a lot of his work in the receiving game. Now, I know he still had a great season last year. He finished way above his ADP again as the RB8. But when you're pretty much tied with Christian McCaffrey for usage and you average 3.5 yards per carry and you only had 7 touchdowns on 401 carries, the efficiency is not there. He's not efficient. He was not efficient. And I know a lot of you guys can blame it. Oh, well, the offensive line wasn't good. There's a lot of things you can blame it on, but the underlying fact is that he's just not efficient. He's not. It's going to be extremely difficult for him to even get close to reaching that again. There's no way he gets close to Christian McCaffrey's touches or usage or the 2nd most usage in the NFL again. So we're kind of already drafting him at his floor next to the guys that actually have a lot of potential to improve from last season. But nobody's really talking about Bucky Irving. I haven't heard literally anybody say his name before. He is the running back that they drafted to back up Rachaad White. He is honestly a pretty big deal in this backfield as far as fantasy football goes. Is he going to get an insane amount of work? A split backfield, going to get the receiving role, touchdown? Probably not. He's more of a thorn in Rachaad White's side, but he's definitely going to hinder his fantasy production, especially considering he's not going to get the same amount of volume. It's just not going to happen. The coaching staff has said it. If you've watched any of the press conferences, they kind of were saying, we don't want to give Edmonds, we don't want to give Vaughn any of this work. It's really just Rachaad White. We have nobody else to give it to. We're not going to give him 30 touches a game, but we kind of have to. And it's obvious looking at his ADP that nobody's really taking this into account. Again, pretty much the only reason Rachaad White was so good was because of his volume, and he still only averaged 14 fantasy points a game on probably the best opportunities. Irving is way better than Edmonds and Vaughn and all of the backup running backs that the Buccaneers tried to get involved last season. He's going to get some sort of production. Is it going to be a lot? Probably not, but definitely enough to make an RB8 draft spot for Rachaad White way too much. And unfortunately, a lot of the times in fantasy football drafts, it's less about the players you love and more about the position and the value you're just getting. There's really no room for Rachaad White to improve given all the stats that I gave you before. And moving into a wide receiver that I'm really not loving drafting, again, the value and pretty much the whole situation just is not there, is Davante Adams. And this does hurt me because over the offseason, I was hoping that he would get in a better situation and we would have a chance to draft him and he would be a good player in his 31, getting old season. I'll get into that in a second. The numbers are stacking up against him. He's going into his age 32 season. I know everybody overreacts about age in fantasy football, like, oh, a running back's 28, he's not going to be good anymore, don't draft him. Like, I understand that, but it is a real thing when you look at the stats, and I'll explain it. His 31-year-old season last year compared to a bunch of other wide receivers at his caliber, like Jimmy Smith, like Santana Moss, in their 31-year-old season, the average fantasy points per game of these top-tier wide receivers at their age 31 season is only 12 points per game. And I know Davante Adams had a bit more than that, but that's supposedly the best of the best. I don't see it getting much better. And let's look into the situation again, which isn't gonna wait. And this story would be a whole lot different if they had a guy like Kirk Cousins throwing him the ball, a guy that we thought the Raiders might go out and draft. Let's help Davante Adams. Let's help him win. Let's help us win. Get a quarterback that can win now. But no, they went out and got Gardner Minshew, which he's not the worst quarterback in the world. He's definitely better than Aiden O'Connell, but he's not that much of an upgrade either, and Davante Adams is being drafted as the wide receiver 12. But let's say you don't care about age. He might be a unicorn. Maybe Gardner Minshew is one of the best quarterbacks we don't even know about, and he just gets the mustache back and goes crazy. He still has to play next to Jacoby Myers, who was one of the most consistent as of target share wide receiver 2s in the entire NFL. He was averaging 7 targets a game, and arguably more consistent than Davante Adams was. But then the Raiders go out and they draft Brock Bowers, one of the highest rated tight ends out of the draft class since probably Travis Kelce, with high draft capital. And none of this makes any sense, and it doesn't help Davante Adams at all to be drafted in the second round as an ADP of wide receiver 12. We have more target competition with Jacoby Myers, with Brock Bowers, and we have Aiden O'Connell, an upgrade to Gardner Minshew, if you want to call it that. It just really doesn't make sense to me. It's going to be hard for him to get to that wide receiver 12, and maybe he'll have a decent season. I'm sure he will be somewhere average. But again, if we're drafting guys in the first and second round, we're hoping for upside and security. And now they have a severely worse run game led by Xavier White and Alexander Mattison. The reason this is a problem is because if you don't have a strong run game, defenses don't need to stack the box and actually play defense against the run, so they can spread out their defense more, focus more on the wide receivers and the target guys like the Brock Bowers, like the Davante Adams, like the Jacoby Myers, because they do have some good wide receiver and receiving options that are going to open up the field. But when you don't have help on the run game, you don't really need to worry about that. So again, it's just not a good situation. This team is not in a great spot for Davante Adams to return his value. As of right now, I'm not looking for him. I haven't drafted him in any of the mock drafts that I've done, and I would suggest you guys to do the same until we see his ADP change. But keeping it on the powerhouse wide receivers, this one might hurt some of us, and it kind of does for me too, is Stefon Diggs. And we are way too unrealistic of him, depending on where you've been seeing your fantasy football information and news. People are being unrealistic. I'm sorry, this is true. He's going at an ADP of 28. That is wide receiver 9. That is way too early.
Wait, bro. Way too early.
He's basically a rental wide receiver 1 that the Texans picked up so they can maximize their window with CJ Stroud on his rookie contract. Now, does that mean Stefon Diggs is doomed, that he's not a good wide receiver? No, it's just kind of the circumstances that they're in. It doesn't hurt him, but it doesn't really help him either. But if we look at the drafts, Nico Collins on average is going at pick 19, and then we have Stefon Diggs going at pick 29. That's a 10-pick difference. It's not really that big, so it kind of shows that we really don't know who's going to be the true wide receiver 1 in this offense. Presumably, it's going to be Nico Collins, which is why he's being drafted earlier. He was a great wide receiver last year, but then we also have Tank Dell getting drafted at pick 36 on average. So it's just really confusing. Nobody really knows who's going to be the guy in this offense. It's similar to the Bears. They have Roma Dunze, they have Keenan Allen, they have DJ Moore, all really, really good wide receivers. But you're kind of banking on the one that you draft to be that guy when you're drafting any of them. And I just find it really, really difficult for Stefon Diggs to live up to that wide receiver 9 value when you have all of these really good wide receiver options, and I'm going to get into why it's kind of hindering him in a second. If we look at this offense, they have Nico Collins, who statistically was the best wide receiver in targets over 15 yards or more, which just means he's a really good deep threat wide receiver. He was also second in wide receiver efficiency last year and 6th in yards after the catch, finished as the wide receiver 7. A great season with CJ Stroud as a rookie. On top of that deep threat of Nico Collins, if you watch any of the season last year, you know that he was. They have Tank Dell, who plays on the outside 70% of the time. He's insanely fast. He is another great outside wide receiver. He was 12th in average target distance, 14th in yards per route run. Again, just more stats showing you that they're really efficient and good downfield. And then we have Stefon Diggs, a really good caliber wide receiver, but fell off at the end of last season. I know we all remember that, and it really can't be on anybody else but Stefon Diggs. He still ranks 7th in target accuracy as far as quarterbacks to wide receivers go, so he's still getting good looks. But once that offensive coordinator switched and everything switched where he just started being bad, he was ranked 59th in distance per target, which shows he really wasn't being utilized downfield anymore. And if you watch the games, you could tell it was really only like 10, 15 less yards per catch for him, and that really did hurt his fantasy value because he was a good deep threat wide receiver. He could just do everything, but once that deep threat role stopped, he insanely fell off. And if you're smart, using your brain, both of these wide receivers for the Texans do that very, very well. They are downfield guys, really efficient in that. Stefon Diggs took a back seat in deep targets. He wasn't as efficient in the deep game, so if you put that together, he really has no choice but to give up a majority of that role to the wide receivers that are already on the Texans. Not to mention that he's going into his age 31 season. We already talked about that with Davante Adams. and why that can be a problem. And depending on what site you draft on, he may be wide receiver 10, he may be wide receiver 20, but it's going to be really hard for Stefon Diggs to meet that third round ADP. I really think he should be going a couple rounds later than that. I assume he's going to keep dropping in fantasy drafts and ADP. It's pretty much inevitable, so maybe this take is outdated after a while, but you guys need to know this, and it is facts, and statistics are following that. But another running back here that we should not be drafting, less of a powerhouse kind of guy, a little bit later down the draft boards that I don't want you guys to trip up on, is Jonathan Brooks. If you're not familiar with him, the Panthers just drafted him, and there's a couple reasons that go into why I don't think we should be drafting him. And if you look at the Panthers, you might just be saying, well, oh, they're not a good team, we don't really want to be drafting anybody from them, they can't move the ball. I do actually think the Panthers are going to improve this season. They have a way better situation. That's for another video though. He's going a little bit later in drafts as the RB25. That's still technically an RB2 in fantasy football, and I just do not like this. In Dynasty, yeah, he's probably a fine pick. He is 20 years old, he's insanely young, but this year is not the year you want to be taking any draft pick with him. Yes, he's 20 years old, but he just came off an ACL, complete tear in November. That's still a pretty recent injury. There's no reason they need to rush him back. If we look at his ADP, he's getting drafted next to guys like Nick Chubb, where that's a controversial topic on its own, David Montgomery, James Conner, established guys. Like, what are we doing here? All of those guys are pretty easily going to finish with 700 scrimmage total yards on the season. And then you have him, Jonathan Brooks, and not a great offensive line, not a great offense in general. You also have Chuba Hubbard still that he's going to split carries with. And again, not the best defense still. And if you guys know anything about defenses, if the defense is bad, you can't run the ball because you don't have control of the game. You need to keep the pace going. So there's just not many opportunities for him there. And I'll call you crazy if you think a 20-year-old rookie running back is going to get a lot of goal line work coming off an ACL tear. Like, that's just going to be Chuba's job. It was last year, even with other running backs in the backfield. So there just really isn't much value. I know he's a low value at RB25, but we don't need to be throwing away our picks on guys like him anyways. It's going to take a while for him to get back in the groove of things. And even when he is back and fully healthy, he's so young that the Panthers really have no incentive to rush him back, especially if they're not a super winning team. Again, in the 7th round, which is where his average draft position is, that is the area where we have so many breakout guys, and he's just a bomb, a trap. There's no reason to draft them. Maybe when he drops to the RB40, I might consider it. But speaking on running backs, one that was a pretty good one last year that I'm not really loving and I need you guys to be aware of is Devon Achane. And this guy is being drafted as the RB7. Now, do not get me wrong. Before you start hating, he was an absolutely amazing running back last year, the literal most efficient running back in the entire league, and was injured. He would have had way over 1,000 yards if it wasn't for that. But we have to understand that he had a literal loophole of a season last year. He averaged 8 yards per carry. That is insane. That's not possible. He had 11 touchdowns on 11 games, 18 fantasy points on only 130 touches. If we look at that from a pure numbers perspective, he's the MVP of the entire NFL. Put him in the Hall of Fame, he's just him. But we are humans and we have to be realistic. 8 yards per carry is just not possible. I can't put it any other way. It's just not going to happen again. If you have that high level of a yard per carry and efficiency number, and then you have a 10% touchdown rate, there's nowhere else to go but down, and we're drafting him as the RB7. Typically, from the outside looking in, I could see where the appeal is. Raheem Mostert is getting older. He had his most healthy season of his entire career last year. He doesn't usually stay healthy, and he's also a rookie, so he's going to get more work as the seasons go on. I just don't see a world where Achane can handle a full workload. He's a pretty small running back for as far as NFL guys go. He's 185 pounds, 5'9". The height, not so much, but the weight kind of does concern me. If you're getting a Christian McCaffrey level workload, like 300 carries, like it's tough. Historically, just actually looking at the facts, the only way running backs at this size and this weight can be a consistent top 5 guy every year, or just have those years, is if they play wide receiver, kind of like a Christian McCaffrey. But he only had 37 targets on the entire year, and I know he missed a lot of games, so that pretty much averages out to 3 targets a game. And then they go through and draft Jalen Wright, who makes the 3rd running back in their RB room. I just find it hard to believe that his role can really increase. Yes, he's going to be healthy for the entire season this time, which is going to help, but even if he drops down to a top 10 efficiency level as far as running backs go, there's just no way he can live back up to that RB7 where he's being drafted at. It's just, we're drafting him with no room to improve, and unfortunately that makes us not be able to draft the guys we like. Once he drops into the late 3rd, maybe 4th round, I'd love to draft him, but a 2nd round ADP is just way too early for a guy that is going to be in a split backfield again. Yes, it's a great offense, but it's just not looking good. But that is going to finish off this video. I'm extremely excited to get this season started off again. I'm so happy you guys watched this video and enjoy these videos. Make sure to drop a W in the comments so I know who the OGs are that watch this video all the way through. Super excited to get you guys these content videos and everything coming out, because I've been doing a lot of research over the offseason and we will go absolutely crazy. You guys are the OGs. You guys matter. I love you guys. See you guys in the next video coming soon.